All right, here's a question for you. What happens when a middle-aged married guy with a couple of kids decides to dive deep into Taylor Swift's discography? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Kyle, and I'm listening to Taylor Swift's discography for the very first time, in chronological order from the debut album to the very end. And I just finished the Red era, and I'm super excited to talk about it. This journey started as a way of connecting with my daughter through music, but this era has been particularly special because this album has so many of her favorite songs, and now some of mine too. So in this video, we're going to do a final reflection on the full Red era, and as usual, I'm going to divide it into 3 parts. In the first part, we'll talk about my general thoughts and overall impressions of the era. After that, in the second part, we'll talk about my personal highlights, what I liked the most and the moments that really stood out to me. And then third, we'll wrap it up with my biggest takeaways about Taylor and her music, and maybe a little bit about what I've learned about myself through this era. And of course, in the end, we'll tackle the big question of, am I a Swiftie now? So make sure you stick around because we'll definitely address that at the end. So thank you so much for clicking on this video. I'm super excited to share this experience with you. And if you want to see some of my previous album recap and reflection videos, head over to my page and you can find them there. And if you want to support my channel and get an ad-free version of this and every other video that I post here on YouTube, along with full-length album reactions and music video reactions and live performance reactions, all of Taylor Swift, you can find those over on my Patreon page, and the link for that is down in the description. All right, so that's enough of an introduction. Let's get into it. All right, let's kick it off with my general overall impressions and thoughts about this album. You know, I'm not going to beat around the bush and like kind of drag this out. I'm going to be upfront and honest here at the very beginning and say this is by far my favorite album of hers so far. It's the 4th album that I've listened to. I'm listening, you know, chronologically. I enjoyed the debut album. Before this, Fearless had been my favorite album. Speak Now had a lot of songs that I liked, but Red, to me, so far, is the most complete package. I feel like it was a big step forward in so many ways for her, creatively, emotionally, and maturity-wise. It just was such an improvement over everything that she's done previously, and everything that she's done previously has been good. I've enjoyed all of it so far, but this just felt like such a big step forward. Musically, it was much more layered and intentional and thoughtful. It was a bit more complex, but it was also a lot more subtle. It wasn't quite so in your face. There was a little bit more intricacy to it. And as somebody who is a music first listener, like when I listen to music, I'm listening to the music primarily, and the lyrics a lot of times are kind of secondary to me. And so listening to this album as a music first listener, this one had so much more for me to dig into than the previous albums. And again, I enjoyed the previous albums. They were also good. She's an incredible songwriter and has been since her debut album. This one just was such a big step forward and really rewards a deep listen and multiple listens and re-listens. There's just so much more to hear, so much more to notice, and there's so much more to just digest and dissect, and I really liked that. And then when I do move on past the music and get into some of the lyrics, this one just felt a little more mature thematically and lyrically. You know, the previous albums, their kind of exploration of love and relationships and that sort of thing was maybe a little two-dimensional, and I think that's not an unfair or unkind thing to say. I think that was very genuine and authentic to the experiences of somebody in their, you know, late adolescence, young adulthood. From the debut album through Speak Now, it was, you know, it was a lot of heartbreak. It was a lot of love songs. It was a lot of breakups and that sort of thing. This album, I felt like, just like the music was a little bit more nuanced and had a little bit more subtlety to it, lyrically, I think there were a lot more shades of gray here as well. There's more subtlety in the lyrics to match the subtlety of the music. It certainly also had some of those happy, fun, poppy, catchy, danceable songs, you know, like 22 and Stay, Stay, Stay. But overall, this album just was such a big step forward in so many ways, musically, lyrically, and, you know, even in the production of the album. I really enjoyed so much of what was going on here. This album thematically comes together and paints a really clear, really vivid picture and just creates this very cohesive feel. And I think one of the biggest ways that I felt that were in the two big singles that I knew from this album. You know, coming into this album, I knew the songs, I Knew You Were Trouble and We're Never Ever Getting Back Together. It was kind of impossible to miss those songs if you were alive in the 2010s. Those songs were everywhere. And prior to this, they were just pop songs to me. I didn't have any, you know, particular opinion about them, you know, positive or negative. They were just, you know, they were radio friendly pop songs, nothing more, nothing less. But hearing those songs in the context of this album really showed how well done they are, because they make such perfect sense the way they fall in the track listing here. I mean, I Knew You Were Trouble coming right after Treacherous. It just works. I will say at this point that my connection to her music so far is primarily through the music. I think she's a fantastic, phenomenal lyricist, but I think she is just as good at crafting a song around those lyrics. And I think that's one of the things about her and her music that's a little bit overlooked, how good she is at writing a melody, at writing a structured, arranged song that help highlight those lyrics but can stand on their own. One of the things, as I've kind of re-engaged with my love of music at 40 years old, is that I've come to learn that I don't connect with music now as I am today in the same way that I did when I was, 15 or 20 years old. Back then I was a very lyric driven music listener. I connected strongly with the lyrics, and especially emotional lyrics, and the lyrics here in Taylor's music are definitely strong and they are emotional and they're really good. But as a 40-year-old happily married guy with a couple of kids, they aren't necessarily the part that I strongly connect with when you consider that she was writing these songs as a 20, 22, 23-year-old young adult woman. And that doesn't necessarily connect with a 40-year-old man. But I think that's actually really kind of cool, because I can connect with them reflectively. I can think back to where I was in my life at 20 or 22 years old, and I can relate to a lot of the things that she talks about in these songs and kind of connect with it in that way. But I don't have a strong visceral connection to them now. I haven't experienced the heartbreak that she talks about in these songs in a very long time. But that means that I have so much more to connect with musically that I really enjoy. And I've really liked that about this album in particular. So with that, let's talk about some of the highlights here. And a lot of times when I talk about the highlights, I also want to feature some of the, not necessarily lowlights. I don't think I've experienced a song of hers through 4 albums. I haven't experienced a song that I don't like. There have been some songs that have stuck with me less, that I have maybe forgotten about or were maybe a little bit skippable, but there hasn't been a song that I just don't like. So that kind of makes it hard to talk about the highlights, because I kind of like all of them. But I do have 3 songs in particular that I would like to talk about here. And these songs are, it was hard to pick these songs. It was hard to pick which 3 songs I thought were worth talking about, because like I said, I kind of enjoyed all of them. But the first one is State of Grace. And there's so much that I enjoyed about that song. I think that is easily, so far in the first 4 albums, it is easily the best opening song on an album. That song just sets the mood and sets it right and really prepares you for the rest of the album. And I really enjoyed that one. I especially enjoyed State of Grace for its production. It was a song that was really interesting to listen to, especially, with a good pair of headphones and hearing, how they created the sounds and hearing where they placed the sounds in the soundscape as you're listening. and how they use those sounds to build the song and to build the mood and to help tell the story that the lyrics are driving. That song is just a really well done song that really straddles that line of pop and rock in a really pleasing and fun way. The second song is, a little bit of a repeat because I already talked about this a little bit, but I Knew You Were Trouble. Again, to reiterate what I said a few minutes ago, prior to this album, prior to sitting down and listening to this album, that song was just a pop song to me. It was just a radio pop song that I had heard a million times and didn't really think much of or about. I could probably sing every word of the song even before listening to this album, just because I've heard it so many times. But listening to that song in the context of this album really made me appreciate it in a different way. Again, having that song right after Treacherous just paints the picture of what this album is all about so incredibly well, and I really appreciated that for it. I think to me, though, this song also is a strong indication of her pop turn that from what I understand, is coming in 1989. And that's what I'm excited for. I'm excited to hear that turn, the move away from the pop country sort of thing into the more straight up pop music. I'm excited for that. And this song, I think, is a really good signpost along the way of that journey into the more pop-centered music styles, and I really enjoyed listening to it. But the one song that I can't not talk about, because it has become easily, hands down, my favorite Taylor Swift song, is it's from the vault tracks, the bonus vault tracks from the Taylor's version of the album. It's the 10-minute version of All Too Well. That song really changed my perspective on her and her music, and it honestly kind of helped reshape my own personal approach to listening to music in general. I've talked about it in other places, but that song is built on 4 chords. It's built on 4 chords that previously, if I had heard it, I would have just written off the song having heard those 4 chords, especially if you were to tell me that it's a 10-minute song built on those 4 chords. The 1 5 6 4 chord progression is probably the most overused, most obvious and repetitive 4-chord sequence that I can think of in popular music. And this song used those 4 chords to build something just absolutely amazing. Those chords aren't the song. Those chords are not what this song is. Those chords are the foundation of this song, upon which she crafts an impeccable song, a 10-minute journey that is just, it is worth every second. There isn't a slow part. There's no boring section that you have to get through to listen through to the end. This song, even though it's built on those 4 chords, is probably my favorite song that I've heard, certainly of hers, but in general, in quite a while, I think. And finally, what have I learned from the Red era? Honestly, a lot. I've learned a lot about Taylor Swift as a musician, as a lyricist, as a songwriter. I've learned a little bit about myself as a fan of music through this album. First, the biggest thing is that she's growing. I don't know that I've learned that so much because I did kind of expect it. I know that she does kind of grow and mature in her music and in her songwriting and all of that as she goes through her career. But it was fun to actually see it, because I feel like, again, this album was a big step forward lyrically and musically. It's still very autobiographical, and it seems like pretty much all of her music is, even, continuing into the present day. I'll know more when I get there, but she seems to be thinking about and processing and describing her experiences with a little more care and a little more maturity in this album than she did in previous albums. I think, again, I keep coming back to the idea that her first, 3 or so albums were written by somebody who was, starting at 15, 15 to 20, 21 years old, the life experiences that you have at that age, the your emotional maturity and ability to be reflective about those situations is less well developed than it is as you grow up and as you mature and have more life experiences and a better understanding of the way the world works and who you are and the people that you want in your life and don't want in your life. That sort of thing comes with age. And that was one thing that I appreciated about her early albums, is that they were very authentically her and very authentically from the point of view of somebody her age. Like, I don't think somebody, one of the complaints or one of the accusations about her was that, she heavily relies on co-writers and that sort of thing, which is untrue. I think, has become pretty obvious, but like, you're not going to get a, middle-aged co-writer who's going to be able to write a song, especially lyrically, from the point of view of a 17-year-old girl. You're just not. And I feel like that was one of the strong suits of those early albums, was that they were very authentically her. Even if that perspective was, a little less well developed, it was still authentically her. This album, Red, I think, really showed a step in that direction, that direction of maturity and nuance and shades of gray. It was reflected both lyrically and musically. And I think the biggest thing that I learned about myself as a music listener, as a music fan, because of this album is, how to appreciate the pop aspects a little bit more. And like I said with the 10-minute version of All Too Well, something structurally seeming simple like that, with the same 4 chords, that progression that is well used, you can use that to build something really incredible. And I think her ability to do that really has kind of helped me come to appreciate pop music in a different way. I used to write off pop music in general as a wide swath of music. I would write pop music off as shallow and simple and uninteresting. But this journey so far through her albums from the beginning, and now especially with Red, has driven me into a real sincere appreciation for what can be done with pop music. And it has me really excited for 1989. I'm really anxious and really excited to get to that album. But so far, in the end, Red has absolutely been my favorite album of hers up to this point. So then the big question is, am I a Swiftie now? Is Red the album that has turned me into a Swiftie? And I mean, yeah, like I think it would probably be safe to say that I was even before I got to Red, but Red is the one that solidified it. And I think what's interesting as I think about that is that I wouldn't think of myself as a Swiftie in the way that I would have anticipated, potentially being a fan of Taylor Swift in this way, or especially not the way I would have felt like I needed to be a fan in order to be considered a Swiftie by the wider fandom. I thought I would need to have this, like all in deep personal emotional connection to the lyrics that she and the vibes and the moods and the feeling that she communicates here. And I don't really have that yet, because, like I talked about, it's coming from the position of a 40-year-old guy, I don't necessarily connect with the things that she is describing as a early 20s woman. But I do really enjoy the music. I really appreciate how incredibly talented she is, and I have a whole lot of fun listening to it. There's always something more for me to find. There's always something more for me to hear. And I really am strongly connecting with the music. And I think that is where I am becoming a Swiftie. And I think that's great, because I do connect with the music. Not in a visceral way with the lyrics, but with the music. I like it. I love listening to it. I like Taylor Swift's music, and to me, I guess that makes me a Swiftie. So those are my thoughts on Red. All in all, it was a fantastic experience, and I hope you enjoyed coming along with me on this deep dive. Thank you so much for watching this video through to the end. I genuinely appreciate you spending your time here. And again, if you want to support the channel, the link to my Patreon is down in the description. Over there, you'll get ad-free versions of every video that I post here on YouTube, and you'll get exclusive bonus content that won't be seen anywhere else. And if you like this video, I would so appreciate giving it a thumbs up, maybe subscribe to the channel if you want to see more like this, click that little notification bell. All of that stuff really helps more than you know. So thanks again for everything. I really appreciate it. And until next time, keep enjoying the music. We'll see you later. Music was everything to me growing up, but somehow life got in the way, and for 15 years I barely listened to anything new. Now I'm 40 and I'm diving back in, one song, one album at a time, and sharing that journey with you. Welcome to Hendy Creek.